Let's begin! In Sairento, you take the role of a deadly cyber ninja and must defeat many different types of enemies. The game begins with a short tutorial. Here you will learn that you can double jump, climb up walls by constantly jumping on them, wall run by simply jumping onto one, slide by holding the square button after you land, activate buttons by placing your hands on them, and you can slow down time by pressing the circle button. This does need recharging over time to use though. The tutorial really does cover the basics of the game, and a few more moves become available to you as you progress. Surprisingly, you can play the entire game from a seated position, but when you stand, you obviously get a bit more freedom, especially when it comes to swinging the swords, but when seated, it still works very well. The game has so many weapons to choose from. You get swords, pistols, SMGs, machine guns, throwable weapons, and you can even use claws that look similar to the ones found on Wolverine. All of these weapons are unlocked to use from the very beginning of the game. Personally, I would have liked some sort of unlockable system with them, but I'm sure many will enjoy the freedom you have from the very start. The inventory system also gives you a bit of freedom, as you can choose to place any of the weapons in one of 4 slots. 2 of these inventory slots are found on your waist as belt holsters, and 2 are found on your back. To retrieve weapons from your back, you simply reach behind you and grab. You can even dual wield 2 weapons if you want. The game has several modes of play, so we are going to begin with the campaign. The majority of the storyline is told through voiceovers at the beginning and during each mission. You can skip the dialogue if you wish, and to be honest, I didn't really become that invested in the story. I think it was because I just couldn't wait to get into the next mission, because the gameplay here is so good. Pulling off a series of moves one after another is just so thrilling. It's all very action packed and incredibly fast paced, as long as you play by the world's rules. I say play by the rules because some elements can get in the way of making the game being fluid throughout. When you wall run, you can't use the turn button, otherwise it will break your wall run. This isn't an issue when you're standing though, as you can turn your actual body to see passing enemies. Another issue is if you try to jump when you're close to a pole or metal fence, you simply won't be able to due to the collision detection. These are only minor issues though, when you consider how fun the game is to play. But still, they can break up the otherwise brilliant flow of movement. Some areas do allow for you to take it slower, as you are able to use stealth every so often. Getting a discreet sword kill is very satisfying, but watch out, because if you get seen in that area only once, all hell breaks loose, and it's a fight to the death until you have cleared all the enemies. Some enemies damage you from up close, and others are able to from far away. You are able to dodge, which you will be doing a lot of on the ground. Some enemies can hover in the air, so of course, you could simply shoot them, but if you want to stylishly take them out with your sword, it will require some practice with the game's jumping mechanic, as you must point your move controller upwards to gain more height. Quick traversal can be just as important as good aiming, especially when you're surrounded or are in one of the maps that has more of a vertical layout. It's the freedom of being able to move wherever you want in each of these locations, whilst having a variety of options to do so, and a ton of weapons to experiment with, that really makes this game a blast to play from start to finish. Quick kills are rewarded with a score multiplier, and headshots are taken into consideration. Actually, a very large amount of things are being tracked of here, which are displayed on the results screen after each mission. There's a reason to replay missions too, as you can change the difficulty, which rewards you with more XP. You want a lot of XP too, as levelling up gives you more skill points, which can be spent on new abilities. Just like the other systems in the game, there is a ton of things to choose from here. A lot of these skills do only increase numbers like your amount of health, ammo capacity, and slow motion time, but there are other ones here too that actually give you new abilities, like being able to jump a third time in the air without touching the ground, and being able to shoot slashes at enemies with your swords. You really are free to make your own playstyle in this game, and the customization doesn't even end here, as each of the game's weapons can be upgraded with relics, which makes them stronger. Every weapon has 4 different slots for these. You can change the weapon's colour, add XP boosters, critical hit enhancers, and some weapons can even have increased abilities, like the throwing ones being able to bounce off walls more than once. As there is so many systems that allow you to change so many things in the game, it can be quite overwhelming. But after I had tested each weapon out, I ended up sticking to only one set, and that was having 2 SMGs along with 2 swords. Throwable weapons and bow and arrow take longer to use, so in a game that has so fast-paced gameplay, it's better to have weapons that match its speed. It doesn't make them completely useless, as you can still get the upper hand with them when you combine them with slow motion. But considering you're not constantly going to be in this slowed down state, they ultimately do give you a disadvantage. You're never at a disadvantage with how you actually want to play the game though. The developers absolutely understand that options in a VR game are very important to allow the player to feel as comfortable as possible. And as a result, Sairento has the most options to tinker around with so far in a PSVR game. There's almost too many here. I'm not really complaining though, because the more control given to the player, obviously the better. But just know, you will likely have to tinker around with them a little bit, and test them out in about 2 or 3 missions first, before you find a suitable combination for your playstyle. There is way too many here for me to go through every single one, but you have free move, teleport, anti-motion sickness, can set the speed of movement for certain things, and can even change actual gameplay elements, such as having your guns automatically reload when they run out of ammo. But the most fun option here, that actually gives you another advantage in each fight, is the inclusion of being able to do flips in the air. When turned on, if you reach your arms out and up when you jump, you will perform a flip. You can front flip, back flip, and can even do this off walls. When you do so, you will go in slow motion in the air. The advantage of using this in a fight is not only the extra use of slow motion, but it quickly faces you in the opposite direction to shoot enemies behind you. It is extremely cool to perform, and out of all the PSVR games I've played, I've never quite experienced anything like it. You will need to have quite a strong VR stomach to be able to handle these flips all the time. It never made me feel sick once during my playthrough, and I imagine the slow motion part helps to make the player feel not too disorientated. But I can certainly see some people who haven't played a lot of VR having to ease into this. It only took me about 2 hours and 15 minutes to beat the main campaign. If I had stuck to the normal difficulty for each level though, I would have beaten it slightly quicker. That's not all the game has to offer though, as it does come with some other modes. First up is the missions. These randomly pop up on a map, and when selected, you can add modifiers to them, which makes them harder, but rewards more XP. A lot of these missions take place on the same maps as the campaign, but they do have different objectives, such as eliminating all the enemies or for surviving for a certain amount of time. They really do play out pretty much in the same way, where you simply just kill enemies. In fact, there's only a couple of main campaign missions that slightly change the formula, and that's when you defend a terminal from waves of enemies and disarm bombs on a train. The rest is basically kill anything that moves. Also in the missions section is an operations mode. This gives you 3 missions from the map to complete, and doing so will reward you with a strong box. These contain weapon relics inside. The other mode is called challenges. Here there are 2 games you can play. The first is called Endurance, which is basically a survival mode that goes on forever, with the difficulty increasing over time. And the other mode is called Gauntlet, where you must play through an endless amount of levels, one after the other. Once again, the difficulty increases the longer you stay alive. The final mode in the game is online multiplayer, where 2 people can play co-op. There's 4 different modes you can choose from, but once again, all of them do play out in more or less the same way as the missions, which basically has you killing all the enemies. The only exception that does feel a little bit different is Assassination, where you will face a boss at the end. There is a load of maps you can play on, and the same amount of difficulties from the single player do make an appearance here. The only difficulty that really challenged me and the VR grid was the final one. All of the rest were pretty easy to get through. This is mainly due to the enemies not receiving a major increase in health. Sure, bullet sponges are never that fun in games, but the lack of challenge in multiplayer did prevent us from having a whole lot to keep working towards. You can turn friendly fire on or off, so it's extremely odd that a one-on-one PvP battle mode is not present here. It really would have been an amazing mode to keep returning to. That being said, multiplayer is a lot of fun, and it's great to see a server system that shows you exactly how many people are playing at that moment in time around the world. I really wish all PSVR games were as transparent as this. Trophy wise, the game does come with a platinum, and the list will take quite a while to do, but it is a bit lacking, considering how many systems and modes there are in the game. You will get trophies for completing every single mission, killing enemies in a certain way, reaching a certain level, completing a mission without being hit, and there are 3 tied to beating 3 missions on the hardest difficulty, which will take some doing. It's certainly not a bad list, but some tied to the endurance mode and gauntlet would have really elevated it. Sairento is a very fun game, and although I have pointed out some negatives, I do highly recommend getting this game. My only real main issue that echoes throughout most of the game is that I wanted the game to entice me to keep on playing. Considering the amount of customization in this game and different modes that allow you to keep unlocking stuff, they really could have dragged out the grind. I just felt like I had quite powerful weapon relics too quickly. That being said, there is still a reason to keep unlocking more and more skills, mainly thanks to the endurance mode and gauntlet. The more skills you unlock, the better you will do in these. So there is certainly an addictive element to leveling up here, and it will take a very long time to unlock every single skill. The developers of Sairento absolutely know how to make a very fun VR game, and know that VR players need a lot of options to make their experience as comfortable as possible. All the systems in this game have an incredible amount of depth, which offers the player so many choices when it comes to picking their own playstyle, and showing it off in multiplayer is always going to be a good time. Overall, Sairento absolutely lives up to expectations, and proves that complex movement systems can be done in a PSVR game without the need of analog sticks. It's one of the best action games for the system, and everyone needs to at least try the slow motion front flips. Nothing has come close yet to giving you the freedom of movement whilst giving you the impression that you're right in the middle of a Hollywood action film. If that wasn't convincing enough, take a look at these swords that sound like lightsabers. This is really a great game, and the front flipping mechanic really should be in all games from now on. I don't care what game it is, even if it's a VR Monopoly board game, just let me flip. As always, if you enjoyed this review, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more PSVR content. Oh, that's a long one.